What's up, tube viewers? My name is Pax, and I'm speaking facts. And today, I'm here to talk to you guys about a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'm back like scoliosis and halitosis, and today, I'm going to react to a piece that 60 Minutes did where they went inside the controversial CECOT prison and did a documentary. As you know, the current administration has placed a huge emphasis on maintaining our border and rounding up illegal immigrants and deporting them back to their native countries. Spearheaded by ICE, there have been numerous people taken into custody, and some of them end up inside of this prison called CECOT. So we're going to go over here with 60 Minutes, who always brings us exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, and this time should be no different. I watch CBS Morning News. Shout out to Gail King. Shout out to Nate Burleson. He's from Seattle. Shout out to Tony DeCopo. He was recently promoted to the CBS Evening News anchor. I look forward to seeing him starting in January, I believe they said. And of course, I cannot forget my guy, Vladimir Duthiers. So y'all go check out CBS. They're a parent company, of 60 Minutes and obviously Paramount Global. So great content. We appreciate them for it. You guys go check them out. And we're going to go over here to 60 Minutes, the documentary that they recently produced about the CECOT Maximum Security Prison. We're going to see what the conditions are inside. We're going to see what the inmates are reporting and tap in with them and see what's going on. So y'all bear with me. I'm going to give my commentary.
You may recall earlier this year when the Trump administration deported hundreds of Venezuelan men to El Salvador, a country most had no connection to. The White House claimed the men were terrorists, part of a violent gang, and invoked a centuries-old wartime power, saying it allowed them to deport some men immediately without due process.
So ICE obviously is the ones going out. They're taking people into custody. And once the government, the Department of Justice, identifies these individuals who are taken into custody, they are immediately deported to this prison. The government does not afford them the rights that we are afforded as American citizens.
An unusual strategy that sparked an ongoing legal battle. Tonight, you'll hear from some of those men. They describe torture, sexual, and physical abuse inside CECOT, one of El Salvador's harshest prisons, where they say they endured 4 months of hell. It began as soon as the planes landed. The deportees thought they were headed back to Venezuela, but then saw hundreds of Salvadoran police waiting for them on the tarmac.
Whoa, that's a huge surprise. They thought they were going somewhere else. The plane lands, and a whole bunch of their native police are waiting for them, and it doesn't look pretty.
Shackled, they were paraded in front of cameras, pushed onto buses, and delivered to CECOT, El Salvador's notorious maximum security prison.
En el momento en que llegamos, el director del CECOT
When we got there, the CECOT director was talking to us.
y lo principal
The first thing he told us was that we would never see the light of day or night again.
el día ni la
Can you imagine that? The first thing you're being told when you come off that bus is that you're never going to see the light of day again. Let that resonate for a second.
de la noche.
He said, "Welcome to hell. I'll make sure you never leave."
Did you think you were going to die there?
We thought we were already the living dead, honestly.
We met Luis Munoz Pinto in Colombia. He was a college student in repressive Venezuela and hoped to seek asylum in the United States. In 2024, he says he waited in Mexico until his scheduled appointment with U.S. Customs and Border Protection in California.
So it sounds like this young man actually went through the proper steps to become a U.S. citizen, and through whatever channels that he explored, he ended up in America and was ultimately taken into custody and found himself at the CECOT prison.
During that interview,
Me analizaron.
They just looked at me and told me I was a danger to society.
You have no criminal record.
No tengo
I never even got a traffic ticket.
nevertheless, he was detained by customs. He says he spent 6 months locked up in the U.S., waiting for a decision on his asylum case when he was deported. One of 252 Venezuelans sent to CECOT between March and April. Inside, he says their hands and feet were tied, forced to their knees, their heads were shaved.
Once they got inside, they're forced to their knees and their heads are shaved against their will. They have no choice in this whatsoever.
There was blood everywhere, screams, people crying, people who couldn't take it and were urinating and vomiting on themselves. When you get there, you already know you're in hell. You don't need anyone else to tell you.
He says the guards began savagely beating them with their fists and batons.
Tell me about what they did to you personally.
4 guards grabbed me, and they beat me until I bled, to the point of agony. They knocked our faces against the wall. That was when they broke one of my teeth.
Can you imagine once you are inside of this building that you are immediately dehumanized and treated like less than an animal, and even worse than that, because they have no mercy and you have no rights. You're viewed as trash.
CECOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, was built in 2022.
For all intents and purposes, as she just said, the Terrorism Center. I would imagine that the majority of the people that this place houses have been classified as the worst of the worst of the worst within whatever society. And they are terrorists a lot of times. And you can go and research some of these countries and some of the gangs that are probably going to be referenced specifically in this documentary. And before you pass judgment on some of these policies, I know we're all divided with our opinions and policies and politics, but before you pass judgment, I just challenge you a little bit to go and spend a couple of minutes researching some of these gangs and how they operate, and some of the victims, which are in mass, in the thousands, tens of thousands. And I want you to think while you're watching this documentary and seeing what's happened to these prisoners, but I want you to, maybe if you've ever been in prison or jail for any amount of time, whether it was just a couple of hours or a long period of time, think about the rights that you had. Think about the conditions of the prison, how the guards treated you. Were they able to beat on you at will? And you know how much contact you have with the outside world versus what you're going to see here, and compare it. Also, if you've ever been a victim of any type of violent crime, if you've ever have a loved one or someone or a neighbor or anyone that you've ever just seen that affected you in any kind of way that was a victim of violence or terrorism, or a terroristic gang activity, we have cartels and things that are active in the United States. If you've ever seen any of those things or been affected by those things, think about it from that perspective. Ultimately, this is going to be a provocative piece of content, and I encourage you guys to just, think through it.
As a key part of Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele's sweeping anti-gang crackdown. The massive prison, designed to hold 40,000 inmates, and its harsh reputation are a point of pride for Bukele, who regularly allows social media influencers to tour it.
As you can see, we're literally in the middle of the desert.
Guards show off cramped cells where metal bunks are stacked 4 high. There are no mattresses or sheets. Inmates said they had no access to the outdoors and no contact with relatives. International observers warned CECOT was violating the UN standard for minimum treatment of prisoners. And 2 years ago, during the Biden administration, the U.S. State Department cited torture and life-threatening prison conditions in its report on El Salvador.
Does this add up with any of the reports we might have heard about any American prisons or jails that we've heard, or the conditions that some of the places that American offenders are sent to? Just food for thought.
But this year, during a meeting with President Bukele at the White House, President Trump expressed admiration for El Salvador's prison system.
They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games.
In March, the U.S. struck a deal to pay El Salvador $4.7 million to house Venezuelan deportees at CECOT.
These are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
The U.S. government said these people are the worst of the worst.
These people are migrants. And the sad reality is that the U.S. government tried to make an example out of them.
So what he's alleging is that the U.S. government falsely targeted these individuals who are migrants and labeled them as terrorists or gang members in order to send them to this prison where the United States is actually paying their government to house these individuals.
They sent them to a place where they were likely to be tortured, to send migrants across Latin America the message that they should not come to the United States.
Juan Papier is a deputy director at the nonprofit Human Rights Watch. In an 81-page report released in November, the organization concluded there was systematic torture and other abuses at CECOT, and that nearly half of the Venezuelans the U.S. sent there had no criminal history. Only 8 of the men had been convicted of a violent or potentially violent offense.
How do you know they weren't gang members?
We cross-reference federal databases, databases in all 50 states in the United States, and also obtain criminal records in Venezuela and in the countries where these people lived. And the information we obtained in the United States is based on data provided by ICE.
So ICE's own records said...
ICE's own records say that only 3% of them had been sentenced for a violent or potentially violent crime.
So ICE obviously is at the forefront of these massive roundups and sweeps where people were taken into custody, ultimately identified, and if determined to be a part of one of these violent groups, they're sent off to CECOT. So what we have to do now is we have to decide, was the government using a false narrative in order to take these people into custody and send them to CECOT, or were they actually a part of these groups where the government is alleging them to be a part of, where they are ultimately considered to be terrorists?
60 Minutes reviewed the available ICE data. It confirms the findings of Human Rights Watch. It shows 70 men had pending criminal charges in the U.S., which could include immigration violations. We don't know because the Department of Homeland Security has never released a complete list of the names or criminal histories of the men it sent to CECOT. Rapid deportations have been a key part of the Trump administration's immigration overhaul. The administration considers anyone who crosses the border illegally to be a criminal. Illegal crossings are now at a historic low. But some immigration attorneys say the administration has used flawed criteria to justify deportations.
In order to determine how you feel, one must take into account that the current administration won by a landslide. I mean, he definitely secured the popular vote across the nation. And so one of the key things that he campaigned on across the nation was a tougher border, controlling the border, and the deportation of illegal immigrants. So, keep that in mind when we're, passing judgment on some of the things that we're seeing and hearing.
Yo tengo algunos tatuajes, ninguno hace referencia.
I have some tattoos. None of them have anything to do with any criminal group.
Me dijeron,
I explained to them, saying that I didn't belong to any gang, to which the agent responded, "But you are Venezuelan."
Pero si eres venezolano.
60 Minutes reviewed this document agents used to assess Venezuelans. A person with 8 points was designated as a Tren de Aragua gang member and deportable. Tattoos that immigration officers suspected of being gang-related earned 4 points. But criminologists who study gangs say tattoos are not a reliable way to identify Venezuelan gang members because, unlike some Central American gangs such as MS-13, Trinidad does not use tattoos to signal membership. Venezuelan national William Lozada Sanchez was also deported to CECOT. He told us the guards there also accuse Venezuelans with tattoos of being gang members.
Yeah, so gang markings, tattoos are a common way for gang members to celebrate their neighborhoods, celebrate their gang, or even, silently communicate with themselves or other gang members some of their achievements and accolades. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that the police would think that these people that are being rounded up that do have tattoos could be gang members. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is, everything evolves, and we've heard of, some of these groups even that people think have infiltrated all facets of life within our own society. And those people are not going to celebrate by way of tattoos and skin markings and certain things where they'll be identified easily. So, I mean, if it is to evolve, I mean, ultimately one person could come to the conclusion that, they are, just because they do or don't have these markings or tattoos or whatever these tattoos may or may not symbolize, that would be the determining factor for identifying them as a gang member.
He detailed months of abuse and being forced into stress positions. So you had to be on your knees for 24 hours?
Wow.
Yes, because they put a guard there to watch us so that we wouldn't move.
And what would happen if you couldn't make it?
They'd take us to the island.
What's the island?
The island is a little room where there's no light, no ventilation, nothing. It's a cell for punishment where you can't see your hand in front of your face. After they locked us in, they came to beat us every half hour, and they pounded on the door with their sticks to traumatize us while we were in there.
The torture was never ending.
Interminables.
They would take you there and beat you for hours and leave you locked in there for days.
Some of the deportees described being sexually assaulted by the guards.
What the fuck?
Now that's taking it too far. I know I shouldn't be making light of this situation, but that's taking it way too far. All the beatings and stuff, we're men, we're kind of tough guys and stuff when ain't nobody looking and everything, we think, but come on, man. Come on, man.
They were hitting your private parts?
Sí.
With a baton?
No, they tugged at them with their hands.
And they did that to multiple people?
A su mayoría.
To most of us.
The men.
They tugged on their genitalia with their hands? I mean, man, chat, listen. Did I hear this correctly? The guards are going around after they've been beaten and they're laying there and they can't even fight back and they decide that they want to grab their genitalia and tug on it to the point, man, this has gotten out of hand, y'all. Now, man, listen, this is wild.
Say they grew weaker by the day. They claim the prison lights were left on 24 hours a day, making it difficult to sleep, and that food and medicine were often withheld. Did you have access to clean water?
They never gave us access to clean water. The same water from our baths and toilets was the same water that we had to drink and survive on. If we had serious injuries, when the doctors examined us, they told us that drinking water would heal it.
So they're telling the injured prisoners to drink water, and the water's filthy.
Súper sucio.
Super filthy.
Mientras más mal nos veyeran.
The sicker and more injured we were, the better it was for them.
In late March, about 10 days after the first U.S. deportees arrived, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem toured the prison. Did they speak to anybody, any of the prisoners?
Nunca.
Never. Not with any of the detainees. They never spoke to us.
Of course not.
We only saw the cameras.
At some point, Secretary Noem went to another area of the prison to record this video.
First of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences.
There were men standing behind her, heavily tattooed. Who are those men? Do we know?
We know that those men in her video are not Venezuelans. They are Salvadorians, probably accused of being gang leaders, probably people who have been in jail for many, many years in El Salvador.
So those particular tattoos, if I'm correct, keep me honest in the chat, you're not even allowed to wear certain tattoos, and especially in certain places, if you're a member of one of these gangs or organizations, if you're not a leader. So some of these tattoos that you guys are seeing are absolutely identifying markers for certain positions in certain gangs. Another thing, one thing to think about. Some of you guys might have jobs and, or even been at a school or an institution, but place where you work, and maybe the big wigs come through and they're gonna walk through. Do they actually show what's actually going on a day-to-day basis? Or do they get in there and do they make everybody clean up and they hang up different pictures and new clocks? The clocks got new batteries and stuff, and everything has a certain aesthetic to it. And then the big wigs come through for 10 seconds. They don't notice 90% of all the stuff that they made you guys do in order to prepare for these people to come through? Or do they show the real? When everybody comes through, when the cameras come through, and whatever situation that is, do they show the actual day-to-day operations of whatever's being taken place or whatever's being controversial or whatever's being alleged? No.
Human Rights Watch was able to confirm that with the help of this intrepid team of students at UC Berkeley's Human Rights Center.
They're getting to the bottom of it.
All men have either an MS on their chest or a 13 or an ES for El Salvador, and all those gangs are associated with El Salvador.
Not the Venezuelans.
Yeah.
To help verify the deportee stories for Human Rights Watch, the team of students combed through open source data for weeks. Students are trained in advanced techniques and follow strict international standards for obtaining digital evidence that can be used in courts. Analyzing satellite imagery, they mapped the prison and identified the building where the Venezuelans were held. And remember all those influencers who filmed inside CECOT? One toured an isolation cell.
These are the rooms of solitary confinement
that matched the description of the so-called island where the deportees described being tortured.
And they get absolutely nothing to use to sleep or to rest. Just pure concrete.
A show and tell of the armory confirmed CECOT had the weapons the Venezuelans say guards used on them.
What we did see in these videos was the use of the T-batons on prisoners. Additionally, we also saw the use of painful body positions.
They were showing that off in the videos.
And they do that. It's sort of a practice.
But it was this interview with the prison warden that proved to be most helpful.
The light system is 24 hours a day.
One of the questions that we had was, are the lights on 24/7? He said, yes, they are. So he's talking about how hot it can get in the prison. So there's this sort of pride around the poor conditions and around the suffering.
So the warden takes a lot of pride in the conditions and the fact that these lights are being left on 24 hours a day. They have to bathe and shower and use the toilet and the same water that they all have to use. I mean, the conditions are deplorable by all intents and purposes. However, again, where do you house 40,000 of what are considered by these governments and the powers that be to be some of the worst humans on the planet? I mean, again, that's not for me to decide. I don't want to offer my opinion one way or another. I just challenge you guys to think a little deeper, think outside the box, challenge yourself, get outside of your own comfort zone like I've done with this very topic and dive a little deeper, even beyond my voice and the things that you've seen here, and find out what's going on and why these governments have taken a stance on some of these organizations and gangs and individuals.
Using extreme temperatures or light to disorient inmates is also prohibited under UN standards.
I think one of the things that the work of this team has really shown is that a lot of these stories can be believed.
Alexa Koenig is the director of Berkeley's Investigations Lab, which trains students to research war crimes and human rights violations.
And it's those little details that I think then, if you can bring that together with the physical evidence, I think you have the strongest possible case for accountability, whether it's a court of public opinion or at some point in a court of law.
The Department of Homeland Security declined our request for an interview and referred all questions about CECOT to El Salvador. The government there did not respond to our request. In July, after 4 months, the 252 Venezuelan men were finally released from CECOT and sent back to Caracas in exchange for 10 Americans that had been imprisoned in Venezuela. The Trump administration has arranged more deals, some valued at millions of dollars, to offload U.S. deportees to other so-called third countries, nations to which they have no connection. Among them, war-torn South Sudan and Uganda, which have well-documented histories of torturing prisoners. It began as...
All right, so again, you guys go over to 60 Minutes, check them out, see what they got going on. You guys can even dive a little deeper into the topic. Regardless of what you think, you know, there has to be order, obviously, within civilization. And this is one of the tools that governments use, specifically the CECOT Maximum Security Prison in El Salvador, to house what they deem to be the worst of the worst of the worst. So it's not for me to decide. I just wanted to bring you guys the content. You guys let me know how you guys think or feel in the comment section. Share the channel with your friends. We're up and coming. Like or don't like. Subscribe. I need that. You could do me that one little favor, man. Subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep trying to do this, man. I'm going to keep trying to be provocative. It gets the people going. Until the next time, my name is Pax, and I'm trying to keep it factual. I'm out of here, y'all.